We have 10,000s of passive house dwellings now worldwide. There's not one project with a moisture problem. And that is due to two things, the air tightness and the ventilation.
Welcome to the Passive House Podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Passive House Podcast. I'm Zach Semke coming to you from Seattle, Washington, and I'm excited to have Michael Ingui and Ilka Cassidy here today for a very special episode of the Passive House Podcast. So, Michael, how's it going?
It's going really well. How are you doing, Zach?
I'm good. Looking forward to getting into this great conversation with Wolfgang Feist. And Ilka, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it was a very exciting interview with Wolfgang in Essen.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll get into that very soon and maybe a little backstory about the genesis of the conversation. But before we do, we have some people to thank. So I'd like to thank our sponsor of the week at Passive House Accelerator, and that's Innotech Windows and Doors. Innotech is making everything possible for us at the Accelerator, including this Passive House podcast. And thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. And thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwell North America, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Buizo, Cascadia Windows and Doors, Icon Windows and Doors, Intis Windows, LG Air Conditioning Technologies, Proseco, Source 2050, and Zender. So, yeah, you were both in Essen. What was going on in Essen?
It was a lot of fun. It was a good conference, good people. And I have to tell you, like, really interesting conversations about what everybody's got going on. It's amazing just how much activity there is globally.
Yeah, I think it's always the highlight of the year to go and just see what's happening across the world. And yeah, I think we talk about it in the interview with Wolfgang that things, the core principles of Passive House haven't really changed since the beginning. So it's kind of nice to see what has evolved out of, the first ideas.
Yeah, and so this was a conversation that you were able to make happen at the International Passive House Conference, which I think you're both are alluding to there. And it sounds like it was the 35th one, and I was experiencing lots of FOMO as I was listening to this. I was wishing that I had been there. It didn't work out this time, but I'm looking forward to future ones, and I think I was able to enjoy vicariously the experience of being there, and I think our listeners will as well. So you both do a little bit of an kind of intro to the conversation here in a moment. So let's jump into that, and then we'll come back with some reflections at the other side.
We got to spend some time with Dr. Wolfgang Feist. Yeah, he sat down with us and talked to us about scaling, about a little bit of the history of Passive House and what's exciting for him.
It was so well timed. It was right after the plenary, which was wonderful, right after the closing and right after they announced Passive House in Innsbruck next year. So the whole crowd was on a high. It was kind of difficult to get Dr. Feist to the room because there are so many people who wanted to talk to him. That's the level of excitement that was surrounding us at the end of this conference. But the conversation was really good.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
And we fought to get him to this, to this room, right?
Yep. He's a popular guy today.
Like everyone, actually, who we interviewed, every time I tried to grab someone, I had to lead them through the crowds because everyone wanted to talk to them, which is pretty amazing.
It's good stuff. So Dr. Feist, with such an incredible conference that ended on such a high note, with next year being in Innsbruck, but also just so many good projects going through what's happened in the past 30 years, 35 years. We've been talking about like what scales Passive House, where is it going? But I felt like I kept getting answered with all these wonderful projects. How are you seeing things and how are you feeling after today's conference?
Well, I think nowadays we are at that place where we don't have to prove any longer that this is really working. Huh?
Yes.
I think this is clear everywhere. And also there cannot be anybody saying it might be working in Stockholm, but it will never work in Auckland. Yeah? This is over. Yeah? We have projects everywhere and everything
Agreed.
is working. Yeah? Now, the next challenges will be the existing building stock, especially in the industrialized countries, because that's the main source for the dependence we still have on fossil fuel. And so we need solutions for the retrofit of these existing buildings. You have demonstrated it already in some examples, but of course that has also to be scaled.
Yeah, scaling of the retrofits, I feel, is definitely so important. And what I was excited about, I sat in so many sessions today where they're doing it on a very large scale. I loved seeing the dormitory in New York, which I followed very closely. I loved seeing some of the other projects and just really exciting work and solutions. It felt like, for me, the difference in this conference, I say this every conference, but this one especially, it felt like so many people were coming with so many solutions.
But that's actually the principle we have had from the very beginning. I always said the concentration has to be on realized projects and experiences.
Yeah.
And only in an exceptional case, we will also include some new ideas, something. But the speculation about new ideas, this is not the thing which brings us forward. We need documented examples that you really can see how it can be done. And best thing at the end is always if you have an evaluation, if you also can see how it worked and how the people are thinking about these projects they are living in.
Yeah, that's great. And then the other piece that may not be new to other people, but was more new to me, some of the ways that the Passive House Institute is creating the suite of, I'm describing this incorrectly, you both kind of have to fix it, the suite of products where it's the full package. I think it's just so smart. I was there today when they were giving the component of the award, and there was 5 different ones, but it was the whole wall system. It wasn't just the window. Exactly. And I was like, yeah, you go, because it's not just the window. It's everything around it. Now, I thought that was brilliant, and I'm excited to see that grow.
This is exactly what is needed here. Now we have this fragmentation of different works, which is what every architect is suffering from everywhere, because the window guys, they don't care about any other system. And in order to have a new construction or a retrofit really working, you exactly need these interrelations between the different parts. It's like you have very good instruments in the orchestra, but it will only be a symphony if we can actually play together. And that is what we want to create here. And the surprising thing is we're actually improving a component which is normally being produced nowadays into a Passive House component is far less difficult than most people think. It's a one-time step to do. At the end, it might be a little bit more material needed for a frame, for example, a little bit more PVC or whatever it is, but it's the same production line. It's the same kind of experience these producers have, and they can improve. And this is not only a small step. The improved component at the end will have at least half the loss or something like that. So it is really helpful.
Yeah. I think I'm seeing in the U.S. what I think you've seen in multiple countries as it takes off, where more and more components.
Hopefully it will take off in the U.S. also. I have been looking into the U.S. development that they are still importing a lot of the components. But it shouldn't be a huge problem to produce all these things also in the US.
That would be the next step. I agree.
And I think this is not only important for the development of the energy efficient construction, it is, but it would also be a path, a constructive path, how to recreate responsible industrial developments in the US, innovative
And build the economy.
actions, yeah? Because in one thing Trump is right, that is, it was never a good idea to bring the whole production base out of a country and to be not able to do it. That you cannot solve that in that aggressive way. The tariff will not solve it. Yeah? The only way to solve that is to have motivation for people in the US to create products, to be innovative, yeah? to be what I remember in the 70s, we were looking, the whole energy efficiency community in Europe, we were looking into the US. There was a journal called Solar Age. Yeah? We had, if you look for the publications they have had, you might be able to find publications about things we have been talking here about. So it was all quite well known. It was somehow end of the 70s. Different things in the US happened. I do not completely understand how it happened, but the US lost drive for some time. Yeah? And this is what you need, and what I feel also in the conference. The people coming from the US here, they are exactly in that mindset. Yeah?
Yes.
We can do that. Yeah? And the US has a long tradition in we can do that. Yeah, going to the moon. Yeah, so you can do that. Yeah. So, and this is that's the only way to solve these crises. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah? Not to look for somebody else to blame it on him. Yeah. It's at the end it's us. No? We have to work on the solutions.
It's exciting.
Well, thank you for spending some time with us, and congratulations to 35 years of Passive House. And a big part of your keynote that we just saw was really going down the timeline a little bit to the beginning when it all started to now where we are and what we just talked about, where we have gotten to. So looking back, what are the highlights for you or the milestones?
Well, it was definitely the meeting with the research establishment in Sweden, the Swedish Council for Building Research, we have been working on these solutions at least 2 decades earlier. Yeah? And they made everything open for us to access these things. And we started that collaboration. And at that time, I was a young guy. So at the moment, I even couldn't imagine that I would, at the end up building a demonstration project home. But it was Bo Adamson, yeah, who told me it has to be realized. It's not just enough that we do the calculation on the computer. And as you see, he was completely right. Yeah, they have to do it. Yeah,
if they see it, they will believe what they see.
Exactly. Yeah. When later on the processes when created, well, after the visit of Emory, that's exactly it was not a made-up story. It was exactly our mindset. But Adamson and me was, we wanted to do a research on how far could we eventually go with improving energy efficiency in building, in order to show that the approaches we have taken in Europe, the low energy buildings, with better windows and so, that's the right path to go. But we never intended to make this somehow our own standard, which would be something which would be achievable in a mass development. That was Emory. And when he came, he got through all the things and said, no, that's exactly how we should do it. And he gave us the recommendation, go through every detail again, look at how to make it cost efficient. That is why it's cost efficient passive houses. Yeah? So now you see here, there are so many influences, also of course some other influences, there are so many influences from different parts of the world which played together to make these things possible. And now in the conference you can see that these concepts are really working, and everybody who starts to study and who starts to try to do that, at the end he is successful. Yeah? As if you look into the example from that, you know, if you were in that presentation from the Greek island, somebody from New York, leading a reconstruction process on a Greek island from New York, instructing practitioners on that island how to do a renovation in an NFIT project. Very interesting to see, because that somehow it proves that this is all available nowadays. We can do that. The only thing which is needed is the information. Yeah? That concept of, it's a different concept of globalization. Yeah? It's not a globalization of, say, centralizing production in different places on the world and making the whole system very vulnerable to any kind of conflict. The concept here is to spread the knowledge, yeah? To create small and medium enterprises everywhere in the world which interact, which exchange the know-how, and which make it possible to have a sustainable development everywhere.
I love that. Perfect, yeah.
And that's working.
Yeah, and you see it. You definitely felt it in the conference. You felt that.
And this is not just theory. We have ideas like that have been around since quite some time, but it was often just a theoretical concept. And as long as you don't have the market for what you are doing here, yeah, this is difficult, yeah, because then you always are in a situation where you cannot compete with some of these very big corporations. But in this field, we can compete.
So what I thought was a great reminder doing your timeline was just to show that the 5 principles of Passive House was basically was the first thing that you really developed, and that it has not changed over the last so many years, right? And I think that's, for me, that was a great reminder that the basic that was always right from the beginning, and that now progressing through the timeline, progressing through so many projects, that basis is still there, but there's a lot of creativity that has come to it as well. So there are so many different ways that people are building these buildings now, and or use Passive House as a principle to go someplace else with including natural materials or circular economy or all of these things. But Passive House is still the right basis, and those 5 principles are still just the way they were in the beginning.
Yeah, this is just because physics is right. Yeah,
Yeah.
That is, well, that's my background as a physicist. But of course, you have to translate in a way. In physics, it's only one principle, but it's the Fourier heat equation. No? So now that nobody would understand. Yeah? So you have to break it down into something that people can perceive more directly, and you have to relate it to the actual things which have to happen on the building site, whether it's new construction or a retrofit. Yeah? And I think that was now proven again and again. These 5 principles are not just principles to achieve really energy efficient buildings with really low consumptions without a performance gap, but it turns out that the principles are also really necessary. So nowadays, if somebody does a retrofit of an existing building, I wouldn't recommend to do it without improving airtightness, because if the not tight envelope is the main reason for damages in buildings. So this is a principle which is very important to, and that also came now out of a conference again, this experience that we have not one project, we have 10,000 of passive house dwellings now worldwide. There's not one project with a moisture problem. And that is due to 2 things, the air tightness and the ventilation. This is what has to come together. These are the important things about avoiding structural damage in buildings. And that is actually a thing that I now remember. It was in the first week I discussed it with Bo Adamson, because the Swedish guys, they have known this already since 10 years. And they knew it because they made very bad experience with their first building norms. They run through a couple of very destructive developments in the buildings because they were not tight, not really tight, and because they didn't realize that ventilation is something which you actually you need, actually need to install. Not because you want to save energy, it also saves energy. But the main thing is that's a way to control indoor air quality and to control humidity.
I think about the conversations people are having on return on investment. And the return on investment that people forget about is how healthy the occupants of the buildings are immediately. So they're getting to enjoy the health of their building. They're getting to enjoy and have a better life while they're in that building, and at the same time, the building is better for the environment. You can't beat it.
You know, we have had one of the plenary sessions where a woman from Vienna University, academic, talked about the necessity to change our attitudes generally. And from a very, I think, academic, theoretical standpoint, if you discuss with money, discuss with payback, I completely agree when we say that, of course, the gross domestic product, GDP, is not a measure of wealth. It's completely clear. It's a measure of effort. Yeah? It counts how many money we need to keep things running like they run. But you can spend a lot of money in things you actually don't need. A lot of money even in destruction. Yeah? Don't have to specify that. Yeah. So, or if you reduce the lifespan of a car, for example, to half of the time, this will double the GDP.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and you don't gain anything out of it. So I agree with her in that point. Yeah? And this is, we have to rethink that. Only that part of growth that really results in additional wealth is worthy to be called growth. Yeah? And this is one of the key problems we have. Yeah? That's the thing we agree. What I don't agree is that the general goal has to be degrowth, and also not this analysis that no, not in all countries we manage decoupling. This is true. But in a developing country where people still live in not human worth conditions, you need some growth to develop that, so that in these countries we still have a certain amount of economic growth is not a bad thing. Yes. This is something we really need. Yeah,
true.
And so that's a way I would look at that point. You cannot discuss that in an abstract economic setting, not looking on the things which are actually growing. Yeah. We need to discuss what should be growing, not the production of weapons and of destructive materials, not the shortening of the life cycles in order to create additional GDP. This is all not contribution to additional world. That's what we have to discuss.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. And that's also where, again, Passive House comes in as one example. Because it's not only, if you think about it, using Passive House and EnerFit in the way we do, with the quality we do, this is not just saving energy, it's also prolonging the life cycle of the whole building. So it won't be 30 years or whatever, it will be 50, 60, even longer. Yeah? And that's another ecological improvement we create here. Yeah? And that wouldn't work if a goal is just degrowth. If they say, oh, Passive House, that might be even dangerous because now we produce even more insulation material or what. No, we can't produce enough insulation material. We need that because this is actually a value created which helps us to improve the living conditions for people on the one hand without having higher consumption of the things we have to reduce.
Agreed.
Yeah, so one thing that we've actually been asking everyone we've been talking to is, how do you scale Passive House? Because that's what we want, right? And there have been a lot of different and very interesting answers to that. So I'm curious, how would you answer that question?
I'm the wrong person to ask here. That is, Ken could give better answers, and Alexandra from Massachusetts might be able to give an even better answer, or Thomas from Ireland, because we already were successful in scaling that. So we tried different paths, and all of them may be some contribution But why now all of a sudden? I think now Massachusetts is somehow a breakthrough.
Yes.
It's because this is big scale,
Yes.
everywhere, and successful. But I think it only was possible because of all the work which has been done by the pioneers in the US, by people like Thomas or Katrin and you and all the others. Because for the investors on big scale to go into something like that, what they still perceive as to be new, this is also what we have to understand. We didn't, the most of the time they thought this is just another label, other whatever specific kind of some crazy people doing crazy things. Now they realize that actually might be a path out of the crisis. And when they start to do that, this is what I now realized in Ireland in the certification. Now we realize, first thing, it's not that difficult that we thought. We can do that. We have done it, and it wasn't that expensive. And now it's really working. We are only consuming 1/3 of what we normally see. And all the occupants are satisfied. A 95% satisfaction rate in these dwellings in the first year, and they're even something I thought we have known and have been communicating all the time. Don't occupy a dwelling during begin of winter when it's cooled down, not preheated. So they brought all these social housing people into cold dwellings, cold and still humid concrete floor dwellings, and still it worked. And even in the first, this was November last year, and even in the first heating period, the overall consumption these people had in that dwelling was lower than what we had calculated with the PHP. So, and this is, of course, for those developers, they can't even grasp what happened here, because they always thought this is some other of these green crazy ideas. These people are not using cars, going with bicycles, and now they want to build us buildings without heating. Yes. And now they realize this is something which is working. It's just an impression. Now, how you manage to come through to them, I think that was a result of a continuous work of education, and because the people involved in the project in Ireland that have all been people who were going through a training process involving Thomas O'Leary 15 years ago. Yeah.
Same in New York. I mean, Tomas is the one who brought it to us. I think my whole office, other offices, it was Tomas.
So we should somehow, we have to come up with an idea how we can give Thomas the value back that he has created here.
But I think what happens, you're seeing it in New York, I think you're seeing it in Massachusetts. Once one developer does it well and their tenants are happy, all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly.
And then their competitors, I better do it now too. And I think that's what's happening. I see it in New York. I think we're seeing it in Massachusetts, and that's very exciting.
And we're seeing it now in London.
Oh yeah, yes, true.
We're seeing it now in London.
Yes.
It's very surprising. One social housing company after the other stating that they go passive house, without there's no governmental pressure or whatever. They just realized this is what we can do. This is what will solve a lot of the problems we have. We can rely on this, and that's what's going on now.
Yeah, and it was because one of the biggest developers trusted the process and started doing it, and then a lot of the other ones are following suit. So that's amazing. So thank you so much for your time.
Yep.
And
thank you.
I'm
Good
very
success.
much looking forward to next year in Innsbruck.
Innsbruck will be fun.
It'll be fun,
Right.
It'll be fun.
All right, so that was the interview with Wolfgang Feist by Michael Ingui and Ilka Cassidy. Michael and Ilka, that was awesome. What were some key takeaways for you? Maybe Ilka, do you want to start?
Well, I think, as I said before, just going back to the roots, I think it's just really cool how he says, well, of course it all works because it's physics, right? So yeah, and now it all makes sense, right? That buildings need to be airtight and thermal bridge free, but I don't know, it just seems so obvious now, but I do think that this had to be figured out and learned and shared across the board and really tried out and see if it really works the way it should be working. And also how Wolfgang says, I mean, of course it works, it's physics, but it has to be proven, right? It has to work in reality. You can always talk about it in theory, but in reality, it's not just building these buildings, but it's like how people learn about them and how do you improve upon each other and how do you make it affordable. So I think it's just, yeah, one of the whole, you know, looking back the last 30